Chapter 31. Tail Gunner Joe. He was a liar. Not your ordinary small-time fibber. No, Senator Joseph McCarthy was an enormous, outrageous, beyond belief liar. Trouble was, some people believed him. After all, no one thought a United States senator would lie. Of course, most people didn't realize he had lied to become a senator. He said he was a big war hero, a tail gunner, who had shot down lots of enemy planes. Actually, he had spent most of his war at a desk job, and he made up stories about his opponent, Wisconsin Senator Robert M. La Follette, Jr. Those stories helped him beat La Follette. Joseph McCarthy was a man who liked attention. He wanted people to notice him. He needed an issue. What was an issue that could capture headlines? Communism. Some people were afraid that America might become a communist nation. Joe McCarthy would tell them the danger was real. He would scare them. At a speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, he waved a piece of paper and said it contained the names of 205 communists who worked in the U.S. State Department. McCarthy's list was a fake. But many Americans believed him. That was the beginning of McCarthy's witch hunt. Before he was finished, he had accused hundreds of people of communist activity. He never proved a single case even against one person, but it didn't seem to matter. He was a master of publicity. McCarthy was an exciting speaker. His accusations captured people's attention. Whatever he said got printed in bold headlines, and he knew how to use that new medium, television. Many of the people McCarthy accused lost their jobs. Some lost their homes. Often their friends deserted them. Their lives were ruined. The nation was infected with a bad case of anti-communist hysteria. Hysteria is an exaggerated emotional reaction to fear, horror, or disgust. It was sick. What about free speech and the guarantees of the First Amendment? Those rights were in trouble. During the McCarthy era, most people were afraid to speak out. It was a time of great fear. McCarthy wasn't the only one who ignored the Bill of Rights and its protections. The House of Representatives had a committee called the House Un-American Activities Committee. It ruined lives too. HUAC decided to investigate the movie industry. Many people had the idea that artists and actors were likely to be communist sympathizers. Anyone questioned by the committee might be put on a list called a blacklist. People on the blacklist, actors, producers, writers, cameramen, were unable to get jobs in the film industry. Some filmmakers had been members of the Communist Party. Some had attended communist meetings, often out of curiosity or out of Depression-time fear that capitalism was doomed. People called before the Congressional Committee were asked to name others who had attended those meetings. Anyone named would probably be put on the blacklist. Some writers and actors refused to answer HUAC's questions. Many were sent to jail. To repeat, it was a time of great fear. Ordinary people in America were afraid to buy books, subscribe to magazines, or join organizations that might have the slightest left-wing leanings. Lots of people believed McCarthy's baseless lies. Fear of communism muddled their thinking. But in a free country, it is not a crime to hold any kind of belief, and that includes communist beliefs. The anti-communist extremists wanted to prevent people from reading about communism. They wanted to make it a crime to be a communist. McCarthy made a list of 418 American authors who he said had disloyal ideas. His list included great writers like Ernest Hemingway, John Dos Passos, and Henry David Thoreau. The State Department removed their books from overseas libraries, which were the only libraries it controlled. 39 states passed anti-communist laws. Texas made membership in the Communist Party a crime punishable by 20 years in prison. A Connecticut law made it illegal to criticize the U.S. government or flag. Loyalty oaths were demanded of government workers, including many teachers. The oaths varied. Generally, the job holders had to say they supported the government or were not communists. If HUAC's members have read the Bill of Rights, they have forgotten what it said. They didn't seem to understand that our founders had challenged us to do something very difficult, to provide free speech to all, including those whose ideas we detest. Detest means to loathe or hate. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and the other founders thought American citizens should be free to examine any idea, including ideas that most people find loathsome. Now, that isn't easy at all. You can only do that if you really believe, in Jefferson's words, that truth is great and will prevail if left to herself. Many of our government officials turned cowardly during this time of great fear, but some had great courage. Senator Margaret Chase Smith of Maine spoke out in Congress. I think it is high time that we remembered that the Constitution speaks not only of the freedom of speech, but also of trial by jury instead of trial by accusation. I am not proud of the way that we sneer outsiders from the floor of the Senate and place ourselves beyond criticism. Edward R. Murrow, a television newsman who had broadcast on the radio to America every night from London when it was being bombed during the Second World War, showed courage and integrity too. He decided to give the American people a clear picture of Joe McCarthy. Murrow made a TV film that showed the senator yelling at a witness, belching, picking his nose, and making contradictory statements. Murrow knew he might get blacklisted himself, but that didn't stop him. He said, "This is no time for men who oppose Senator McCarthy's methods to keep silent." Then he added, "We must always remember that accusation is not proof." McCarthy kept attacking. He accused the U.S. Army and many of its officers and soldiers of being communist sympathizers. But he only produced an army dentist who may, at one time, have been a communist sympathizer. Television, which was new in many American homes, let people see the Army McCarthy hearings and the senator's shouting, sneering manners. Most people were disturbed by what they saw, but that didn't stop Joe McCarthy. He went on smearing innocent people. Then a quiet elderly man who was well respected in his home state of Vermont, but little known elsewhere, spoke out in the Senate. His name was Ralph Flanders, and he asked the Senate to vote to censure, condemn Joseph McCarthy. One senator immediately said that Flanders must be on the same side as the communists. But by this time, most Americans had had enough of Joe McCarthy. Murrow's film had shocked them. Senators began hearing from the voters. Most of them were tired of the witch hunts. The Senate voted on Ralph Flanders' measure. Joseph McCarthy was censured for outrageous behavior. The man who had ruined lives and terrorized much of the nation was disgraced. However, he remained in the Senate. McCarthy died a few years later from a liver ailment caused by too much drinking. Neither the executive branch, nor the legislative branch, nor the judicial branch of our government acted boldly during the time of the communist fear. Later, most Americans were ashamed of the McCarthy witch hunts. Joseph McCarthy and HUAC made us aware of the preciousness and fragility of our right to free speech. Freedom of speech is guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. It is your constitutional right as an American citizen. But that freedom to speak out is easy to attack in a time of crisis. It takes citizens who appreciate its importance to make sure we keep it as a basic right. And don't forget, the right of free speech also belongs to those ideas whose ideas you hate. A letter to HUAC. Playwright Lillian Hellman was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee. It was 1952, and she sent this letter to the committee chairman. Dear Mr. Wood, I am most willing to answer all questions about myself. I have nothing to hide from your committee, and there's nothing in my life of which I am ashamed. But I am not willing now or in the future to bring bad trouble to people who, in my past association with them, were completely innocent of any talk or any action that was disloyal. I was raised in an old-fashioned American tradition, and there were certain homely things that were taught to me: to try to tell the truth, not bear false witness, not to harm my neighbor, to be loyal to my country, and so on. I am prepared to tell you everything you wish to know about my views or actions if your committee will agree to refrain from asking me to name other people. Sincerely yours, Lillian Hellman.